As Officer Thomas scanned the neighborhood, he spotted Nate Carter, a resident calmly checking his mailbox. Nate didn't match the suspect's description. He wasn't wearing green, wasn't armed, and wasn't behaving suspiciously. Yet, Officer Thomas approached him with unwarranted hostility. Why didn't the officer pause to assess the situation? Could better training or judgment have prevented the events that followed?
Get your hands off you now! Put your hands up! Put your hands up! Get your hands over here now! Get over here now!
The evening was quiet, the kind of quiet that carries the weight of ordinary life. Mailboxes lined the street, a neighborhood accustomed to its own rhythm. Nate Carter stepped toward his mailbox, a simple motion, the kind that should have gone unnoticed. Yet, the moment his eyes met the flashing lights of a police cruiser, the ordinary became extraordinary. Authority had arrived, not in measured presence, but in immediate escalation. The officer's gaze fixed on him, not on the threat that had summoned them, but on a man living his life. Nate posed no danger, no green jacket, no firearm, no suspicious movement, only the simple act of being present. The air thickened, the silence of a street blocked, the routine rhythm of life suspended. Officer Thomas's voice cut sharply across the still night, uncompromising, unrelenting. Each command was a hammer strike, breaking the calm. Nate's body froze, not from fear of himself, but from the incomprehensible intensity of the response. Hands raised, hesitant but compliant, the space between them became a battlefield of authority. The officer advanced, taser drawn, a tool meant for resistance now wielded against innocence. Each step Thomas took amplified tension, reduced options, and widened the chasm between citizen and enforcer. The rules of engagement, invisible yet rigid in policy manuals, seemed irrelevant here. Force was not proportional, it was immediate, unquestioned, and total. Nate questioned. He did what a person might do when confronted without cause. He asked for clarity. Each word became a spark, fueling an already volatile situation. The street, quiet minutes before, now buzzed with the energy of confrontation, amplified by sirens, flashing lights, and the rising volume of command. The stakes were no longer hypothetical, they were immediate, physical, and irreversible. Neighbors emerged, their silhouettes forming an audience to the unfolding drama. Voices of concern were swallowed by the authorities' insistence. A family tried to intervene, to anchor calm in the storm, but each appeal was met with procedural certainty, compliance, or consequences. Nate's dog barked, a natural alert, but even the sound was misread as threat. Small decisions compounded into moments of crisis, the angle of a body, the pace of a step, the timing of a word. Each choice tightened the corridor of possibilities, each pause thickened the air with inevitability. And then the taser cracked, a flash of light, a sharp sting. The tool against the wrong target. The air shifted, Nate's body jerked. Control had shifted irrevocably. Authority had declared the terms of engagement, regardless of fact, nuance, or risk. The ordinary act of retrieving mail had become a crucible of compliance, where innocence no longer mattered and resistance could be manufactured by misunderstanding alone. It was a moment that defined the trajectory of the encounter. There was no turning back. As Nate struggled to regain balance and voice, the officer's posture communicated dominance, not judgment. Every motion, measured yet aggressive, reduced space and options, demanding obedience. The scene's tension was palpable, captured not only in words but in the silence that fell between commands. The weight of authority, once a protective promise, now pressed down like a physical force, shaping the environment, the responses, and the inevitable outcome. Neighbors' attempts to understand were drowned in a rhythm of escalating control. The narrative was no longer one of law enforcement responding to potential danger. It was a demonstration of power unchecked, unmoderated, and immediate. Nate's attempts at reasoning were silenced, both literally and figuratively, his options narrowing with every command. The moment was no longer a question of law, it was a question of survival within the rigid structures of immediate authority. Time stretched. The taser's presence lingered, a physical reminder of imbalance. Nate's compliance was incomplete only because reason and circumstance demanded it. The officer's escalation was complete, inevitable. By the moment the taser left the holster, the encounter had crossed into irreversible momentum. What followed would be shaped not by the law or necessity, but by the stark projection of authority, and the measured yet restrained resistance of a man caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The escalation continued with geometric precision. The street, once a place of simple passage, became a corridor of control. Each command, repeated and sharpened, delineated boundaries not from law but from ego, from the exercise of unchecked authority. Nate's responses, calm yet persistent, challenged that control, creating tension that was almost physical in its density. His presence alone, unarmed and unthreatening, was enough to unsettle the balance Thomas had established. By now, officers had multiplied around him. Each uniform added weight to the situation. The collective force of authority creating a visual and psychological cage. The spatial dynamic changed. The world narrowed to a set of choices: obey, resist, or escalate. Nate's resistance was non-violent, verbal, grounded in reason and observation. Yet, to the officers, it registered as a challenge. The taser, deployed once, now symbolized the potential for any escalation to be enforced physically, decisively, immediately. Neighbors watched through blinds and from doorways, bearing witness to the misalignment of perception and reality. The commands were direct, cutting, relentless, and met with compliance because defiance could be punished. The weight of authority carried more power than the correctness of action. Each word, each step, each flash of light reinforced hierarchy. Compliance was expected, humanity was optional. Inside the house, Nate's family saw the unfolding danger. Their voices attempted intervention, their hands reached for calm, yet the volume of power, measured in shouts and flashes, exceeded any attempt at reason. A dog barked, a mailbox opened, movements that in any normal circumstance would be mundane. Each became a potential justification for further action. The chaos was not random but contained, deliberate, structured to convey a singular point. Control, above all else, was the measure of this encounter. Nate's retreat into his own home marked another shift. The threshold between public and private blurred under authority's interpretation. Once inside, the illusion of safety diminished. Doors, walls, even familiar spaces became cages under scrutiny. Commands followed, continuous and precise, pressing the boundaries of both law and decency. The physicality of enforcement was evident. Cuffs clicked, doors opened and slammed, bodies maneuvered to exact positioning. Control had become choreography, and Nate the unwilling participant. The moment was punctuated by the officer's insistence on identification, not an inquiry, but a demand. Compliance was not requested, it was imposed, immediate and unavoidable. Nate's questions, logical and grounded, collided with an immovable wall of authority. Each assertion of his rights was met with repetition, commands, escalation, taser, and intimidation. The imbalance between citizen and enforcer crystallized, a stark illustration of how quickly power can pivot from protection to oppression. Civil implications lurked beneath the surface. Nate's eventual lawsuit, a later act of resistance, was prefigured here. The encounter had established not only immediate physical control, but the framework for consequence. Patterns of misuse, oversight, and leniency were seeded in every interaction. Authority, exercised without restraint, had immediate efficacy, but long-term liability would follow, though not before the immediate impact had been fully realized. By the time the chaos dissipated, the neighborhood was left with echoes, the sound of commands, taser crackles, and human voices stretched thin across fear and frustration. The immediacy of control had overridden normalcy. The small decisions, who steps where, who responds when, and who is deemed threat, had compounded to create a moment that could not be undone. Nate's compliance, forced yet measured, was a survival strategy within the theater of enforcement. The scene demonstrated the fragility of proportional response. Training manuals and departmental policies, often cited in hindsight, were irrelevant in the moment. The interaction was determined not by rules, but by the interplay of perception, ego, and immediate tactical decisions. Authority was absolute, consequences for misuse delayed. The narrative, captured in bodycam footage, would later inform discussion, yet at the time only tension, discomfort, and the narrowing of options were visible. In the aftermath, consequences were partial and symbolic. Nate's charges were dismissed. A settlement, undisclosed, closed some avenues of restitution. Officer Thomas, despite clear overreach, faced only suspension, a fraction of the weight one might expect from actions captured in full clarity. The imbalance between immediate enforcement and delayed accountability underscored the broader dynamic. Authority operates with near total power in the moment, yet consequences are diffuse, delayed, and often minimal. The street, once again quiet, retained invisible traces of conflict. Mailboxes stood, houses returned to normal, yet the psychological residue lingered. Witnesses, neighbors, and family absorbed the tension, internalizing lessons about authority's reach and the subtlety with which compliance is demanded. Nate's confrontation, while personal, exemplified the experience of countless others. One misread step, one misapplied command, one moment of assertiveness could transform ordinary life into a controlled, tense spectacle. Every small gesture mattered. A hand movement misinterpreted, a step in the wrong direction, a raised voice, each compounded the threat. The officer's decisions, though seemingly minor in isolation, built upon one another into an irreversible sequence. The physical reality of taser use, the sound of metal cuffs, the visual dominance of uniformed officers all communicated a singular truth. In that moment, authority determined reality. Facts were irrelevant, compliance was compulsory, and yet there was resistance. Nate's persistence, his refusal to accept misrepresentation, his insistence on visibility, introduced friction into the narrative. That friction would shape the eventual legal outcome and public perception. Authority had immediate power, but Nate's assertion ensured it was not absolute. In retrospect, the encounter illustrated both the efficacy and the limits of immediate enforcement. Power could dominate in the moment, but its endurance relied on external validation or acquiescence. The bodycam footage, now a permanent record, exposes the mechanics of escalation. Commands, repetition, positioning, and the calculated use of force combine to narrow options and impose control. Each movement, pause, and escalation reveals the anatomy of authority as exercised in real time. The observer sees not only what occurred, but how and why it gained momentum. The encounter was structured to enforce compliance, yet inadvertently set the stage for scrutiny, accountability, and eventual legal consequence. In the broader context, Nate Carter's experience is emblematic. It is a story repeated across streets and neighborhoods where authority is deployed with immediacy, often without proportionality or assessment. The human element, ego, perception, misjudgment drives escalation. Policy, training, and oversight, while present, act too slowly to prevent the accumulation of irreversible moments. The audience witnesses not only the specific case, but the mechanisms that allow it to occur repeatedly. Ultimately, the story is about the interplay between power and accountability. Nate's resistance, calm yet firm, highlighted the limitations of authority when measured against reason and observation. Officer Thomas's actions, deliberate in execution, demonstrated the immediate supremacy of enforcement, yet the aftermath, legal, social, and moral, revealed that even unchecked authority faces eventual consequences. The encounter closes with a tension between immediacy and long-term responsibility, between physical control and ethical oversight. The street returns to silence, the lights fade. But the lessons remain. Unchecked authority can dominate momentarily, escalate rapidly, and leave deep traces. Every action, every choice, every command contributes to irreversible momentum. Nate's fight for justice underscores the fragile balance between compliance and rights, between presence and threat, between ordinary life and extraordinary consequence. The footage stands as a stark record, a reminder that authority can act swiftly and definitively, but not indefinitely free from scrutiny.